All right, so we're diving into Hezbollah today, and you want to really get it right, not just the headlines.
Yeah, it's tricky. You see, Hezbollah labeled a terrorist group, but they're also deeply embedded in Lebanon, like politically, socially.
It's a puzzle, for sure.
Yeah.
Let's rewind, way back to the 80s. Lebanon's in chaos, civil war, Israeli occupation. The Shia community there, they're looking for someone to fill the void.
And Iran sees an opening, right? That's when they step in. Training, weapons, this shared ideology, revolutionary Shiism becomes the tie that binds.
And it's deep from day one. There's this wild photo. It's got to be right when Iran's Islamic Republic began. Ayatollah Khomeini, center stage. And right there with him, a Lebanese hijacker, notorious guy. Makes you think about those early alliances, who they were dealing with.
Oh, absolutely. But here's the thing. Hezbollah doesn't just want to fight. The Wilson Center stuff points this out. They built a base, a political one. Social services, that's how they resonated with the Shia community, especially the ones who felt Lebanon had forgotten them.
Right? Healthcare, schools, even banking. They became the go-to.
Yeah.
But that's the dilemma, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fighter, provider, how does Lebanon deal with that? You've got a country battling corruption, economic woes, and then there's Hezbollah, powerful, operating within that system, propping it up or adding to the problem.
Tough question. They provide where the government can't, but some say that's the issue. They stop real reform from happening, serving their own interests, not the nation's.
Catch-22. And we can't ignore the military side. We're not talking old weapons here. Hezbollah's arsenal is serious business.
And it's not just the firepower, it's how good they've gotten. Not just against Israel, their time in Syria, that's been huge for them.
Syria, right. Fighting for that was a turning point. Brutal, controversial. A lot of people saw a side to Hezbollah they didn't like.
One story from the ABC reporting always sticks with me. Hezbollah fighter in Syria, he says, "We are invaders. War is too complicated, and I have a family to support."
Wow. It really hits home that these are people making impossible choices. You can't just say Hezbollah is one thing. There are individuals in there, doubts, beliefs.
Exactly. It's easy to forget that they become this faceless enemy, but they're dealing with war, allegiance, just surviving.
For sure. Okay, back to Iran for a sec. That relationship, it's key. But how much control does Iran really have? That's the million-dollar question.
Well, the sources disagree, which is interesting. Funding, training, coordinating, that's there, no question. But to say Iran's calling all the shots, that Hezbollah is just a puppet. It's too easy.
Right. Way too simplistic. A partnership? Yeah. But both sides have their own goals. Maybe the question isn't control, but influence. Where do those goals overlap? Where do they diverge?
Exactly. That's what makes it so hard to predict what they'll do, and Hezbollah has been surprising people for a long time.
Speaking of surprises, their drone program blew my mind. I mean, everyone knows about the rockets, but drones. That changes things.
Right. And it doesn't get enough attention. Flying undetected over Israeli military bases, that's in the reports. It's not just lobbing explosives anymore, it's high-level surveillance, strategic positioning, a whole different threat.
It really makes you rethink what they're capable of. But you have to remember, they were born from resisting Israel's occupation in Lebanon. So this isn't random. It's coming from somewhere.
And that history, it colors everything. They see themselves as freedom fighters, but as we've said, their methods, the alliances they make, it gets murky.
And they've got the firepower to back it up. Some sources say they've got more than actual countries in the Middle East.
Sobering thought. And you combine that with the tech upgrades they've got, the experience from Syria, even their critics have to take them seriously.
Okay, so they've got the firepower. But we have to talk about terrorism.
Yeah.
Many countries have designated them as such, and we're not shying away from that.
Absolutely not. There's a long history there. The sources lay it out. Attacks spanning decades, continents even. This isn't a group that backs down from violence.
And it gets complicated because you have people who see them as freedom fighters resisting oppression. Others, it's terrorism, plain and simple. Even our sources reflect that.
That duality is crucial. Powerful political entity providing for people, but also willing to use extreme violence. It's both those things at once.
A lot to unpack, right? But that's the point of these deep dives. You wanted to go beyond the headlines, and that's what we're doing.
And I think understanding both sides of it, that military strength and the terrorism designation, is crucial to understanding where they fit in and what they might do next.
100%. So let's dig into how they went from this shadowy militia to a major political force. It's a story of resilience, strategy, and a really deep connection to their base. Remember those social programs we talked about? Huge part of how they solidified support with Lebanon's Shia community.
Absolutely. They got that winning hearts and minds matters just as much as military victories.
Yeah.
The Lebanese government, often dealing with corruption, not getting things done, Hezbollah stepped into that void.
They became the ones who solved problems. That builds loyalty that goes deeper than just politics. People depend on you, even if they don't like everything you do.
Soft power in action. But it didn't happen overnight. It was gradual, alliances, confrontations. It's a long story.
Right, like in 1985, their manifesto. Crucial document lays out their ideology, the goals, and they were clear. Resisting Israel was non-negotiable.
That resistance is core to who they are. It's why they took up arms, and it's still driving them today.
And they didn't just talk, they acted. Guerrilla warfare against Israel, tactics even some of our sources say were extreme.
The bombings, kidnappings, those weren't one-offs. That was a plan to wear Israel down and show Hezbollah was a force to be reckoned with.
And it worked. Their campaign, their growing influence, Israel withdraws in 2000.
Cemented their status, not just in Lebanon, but across the region. They were the ones who stood up to Israel.
But it doesn't stop there. After Israel's out, they don't disappear. They embrace the political game, elections, positions in the government.
And they never disarmed. Their argument, which a lot of people bought, was they needed to protect Lebanon from future threats.
Which made them both heroes and a threat. Defenders to some, destabilizing force to others.
That's what's important here. Hezbollah is a product of its environment. War and chaos made them.
And the story's still being written. Syria, the tensions with Israel, Iran. Who knows what's next?
And that's why it's so important to try and understand them, their motivations, what they're capable of.
Absolutely. And speaking of what they're capable of, let's talk about Iran. That relationship is often misunderstood.
People want easy answers, right? Hezbollah is just a puppet of Iran. But our sources paint a much more complicated picture.
Yeah, Iran's influence is there, no question. But puppet, come on. We need to look at the history. Iran saw a chance to support a Shia militia taking on Israel. Strategic, sure, but also shared ideology.
The Wilson Center report really digs into that, both drawing from this revolutionary Shiism, resisting the West, fighting for oppressed Muslims.
Shared goals, feeling like they're in it together. And yeah, there's the practical stuff. Weapons, training, money. The ABC report quotes experts saying Iran gives them whatever they need.
That's serious support, no doubt. But here's the thing. Hezbollah benefits, but they're not taking orders. They have their own goals, their own internal stuff going on.
Exactly. Remember those fighters in Syria, expressing doubts, even angry about being there? They felt it wasn't Lebanon's fight. Hezbollah isn't this one mind, it's people.
And those individual voices get lost? We simplify. It's about understanding the gray areas, not slapping labels on everything.
Totally. So yeah, Iran's influence is there, but what kind of influence? A partnership, but an uneven one. Both benefit, but both have limits, agendas.
Right. Hezbollah has agency, their own internal workings. You need to see that to understand their actions, what they might do next.
So not about control, but about the complexities, the goals they share, the tensions, the limits of that influence.
And that leads us to something else we don't always talk about, their global reach.
Right. Global terrorist organization.
Yeah.
That's not just for show. They're active way beyond Lebanon's borders.
Exactly. We're talking about operations, alliances, alleged plots spanning continents.
It does have that thriller vibe, except the stakes are very real.
Right. And while they're focused on Israel and now Syria, they've been linked to stuff all over, targeting Israeli and Jewish interests.
The sources talk about Argentina, Bulgaria, Thailand, even Peru. Bombings, assassinations, plots that got stopped, that's global reach and a willingness to use violence.
And it's not always direct attacks. They've been accused of training, logistics, even funding other groups that are considered terrorists.
A whole other level.
Yeah.
And way harder to track, to stop.
Exactly. And that's what makes them such a challenge for the world.
It's not just about one attack. It's the network, the money, how they can move resources around the world.
Drug trafficking, money laundering, smuggling, counterfeiting, it's all been alleged. That's how you make money, move it around, under the radar.
So we're talking about, I don't even know what to call it. Not just militants, not just a political party. An organization woven into this whole global network. It's a lot.
It is, and it shows just how many sides Hezbollah has. Hard to define, even harder to deal with.
No doubt. And that's something to keep in mind as we go deeper.
Definitely. Easy answers don't cut it with Hezbollah. You got to look at all of it, the contradictions, what makes them tick. That's how you start to understand. Yeah, it's kind of wild when you think about it. Hezbollah, designated terrorists, but they're also running hospitals and schools. It's not your typical image.
It really makes you think twice about those labels,
Yeah.
right? Some experts even call them a state within a state. Like, in some parts of Lebanon, they've got more clout than the actual government.
Yeah, and our sources suggest it's not just about winning people over. This social service stuff, it's really part of their ideology, creating a community that can stand on its own, especially for those who feel like the government's left them behind.
They saw a need and filled it. Healthcare, schools, financial help, even rebuilding after conflicts. It's like they became the go-to for everything.
And they've been smart about it, you know? It's not just giving handouts. They're building infrastructure, long-term solutions, schools, hospitals, agricultural projects. They even have their own microfinancing system.
It's mind-boggling, like a parallel government almost.
Yeah.
And it's clearly working. Our sources say they're popular, not just with Shiites. Even some Christians and Sunnis benefit from these services.
And that's the crux of it, that popularity. It gives them so much power in Lebanon, but it also makes them basically untouchable.
It's a tough spot for people, right? How do you criticize the hand that feeds you, especially when the government's not stepping up? It's like even if you hate their politics, their military actions, you're still benefiting from their social programs.
Yeah, this web of dependence, it's almost impossible to separate Hezbollah from the fabric of Lebanon, even for those who want to.
Makes you wonder about the long game, right? Does this help or hurt Lebanon in the long run? Can they build a strong country with Hezbollah so dominant?
Million-dollar question. Some experts argue that Hezbollah being so strong actually holds Lebanon back. This parallel system they've built, it undermines the government, makes it impossible to fix the real problems.
They create this cycle, people rely on them, which just makes them more powerful.
Right. But then there's the other side, the argument that they're necessary. Protecting Lebanon, providing what the government can't. Lesser of two evils, you know?
Easy to say when you're not living it, right? The average Lebanese citizen, they're stuck in the middle of this.
No easy answers. What we do know is that you can't understand Hezbollah without understanding this web they've woven. The social programs, the politics, the military, it's all connected.
Totally. And that's what makes it so fascinating. We're digging into the nuance, the gray areas, because that's where the truth lies.
Exactly. And the truth is, they're operating on all these different levels at once. Political party, militia, social service provider, terrorist organization. It's mind-blowing, and it makes them incredibly difficult to counter.
Like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube in the dark.
Yeah.
You know there's a solution, but good luck finding it. But speaking of finding things, I think it's time we addressed the elephant in the room. Hezbollah and the current war between Israel and Hamas.
Absolutely. And it's strange, isn't it? Everyone expected them to be involved, but so far they've been surprisingly quiet.
Right. You have this powerful, well-armed group with a history of fighting Israel, and they're sitting on the sidelines while Hamas and the IDF go at it. It seems counterintuitive.
It does. And some experts think it's strategic. They're hesitant to open up another front while they're still tied up in Syria. Pick your battles, right?
Like they're letting Hamas soften Israel up, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Which honestly wouldn't be surprising given their track record.
And we can't forget about those drone images we talked about. Their ability to hit targets deep inside Israel is a game changer. And Israel's been clear, any attack from Hezbollah will be met with overwhelming force.
It's a high-stakes poker game. Everyone's watching everyone else, trying to guess their next move, hoping to avoid an all-out regional war.
And Hezbollah's not just thinking about their own interests here. They have to consider Iran's goals, too. Remember, Iran sees them as a valuable asset, a way to project power in the region.
Right, but even Iran knows a wider war wouldn't help anyone. It's this delicate dance-balancing ambition with the very real risk of things spiraling out of control.
Exactly. So while Iran might encourage a hard line against Israel, they're unlikely to say, go all out, unless absolutely necessary. Influence, not reckless escalation, that's the name of the game.
But even without a full-on attack, Hezbollah hasn't been completely silent. We've seen those cross-border clashes, rocket fire, more drone activity.
It's a way to show support for Hamas, test Israel's defenses, remind everyone there's still a force to be reckoned with. But it's risky.
It is. One wrong move could have disastrous consequences. And this is taking a toll on them, too. They're already stretched thin between Syria and maintaining their social programs in Lebanon.
A balancing act, no doubt. It just goes to show how complicated their situation is. Internal pressures, regional conflicts, the whole world watching, and they're still trying to maintain this image. The resistance, the political power.
It's a lot. And it makes you wonder, where do they go from here? How do they juggle all these roles, these allegiances?
Those are the questions we're going to keep exploring as we dive deeper into Hezbollah's world. But one thing's for sure, they're not done yet.
You know, When we started this whole thing, I thought Hezbollah was all about military action, I'll be honest. But it's so much more than that. Social programs, politics, this constant juggling act. It's a lot.
Shows you the problem with easy labels, right?
Yeah.
Hezbollah doesn't fit in a box. Not just militants. They're a political force providing for people this symbol of resistance. All of it at once. Hard to predict what they'll do next.
No kidding. But looking at where things are going, based on what's in these reports, one thing seems clear. Things with Israel aren't getting any better.
Doubt it. The clashes we've seen, how heated the talks gotten, and the history there. Yeah, more conflict is a real possibility.
And those drone images we talked about, can't forget those. Hezbollah just waltzing into Israeli airspace like that, so precise, that's changed the game. Israel's nervous, and they have a right to be.
For sure. Hezbollah's got capabilities people don't give them credit for. But don't forget Syria. That's a whole other factor now.
Yeah, double-edged sword, right. Syria's given them battlefield experience, closer ties to other Shia groups. But at what cost?
Exactly. They've lost men, resources, and even in Lebanon, people are questioning getting involved there. It stretches them thin militarily and politically, you're right.
And then there's Iran, looming over everything. Hezbollah's biggest asset, but also maybe their biggest risk.
Tough spot to be in. Iran gives them what they need, the money, the weapons, political cover. But it's not free. Hezbollah can't just ignore what Iran wants in the region, even if it clashes with their own goals.
So if Iran goes all in against Israel, Hezbollah might get pulled into a fight they didn't sign up for, or maybe even one they don't want.
It's a worry, definitely. Caught between their own people, their allies, their own interests. Tough decisions.
And it's not just outside pressure, right? Things in Lebanon aren't exactly peachy. Economy's shaky, politically it's unstable, people are fed.
Hezbollah's not as popular as they used to be. Syria hurt, the Iran connection, and this idea that they're above the law. They've lost some support.
Even a group as powerful as Hezbollah, it shows it can crumble. They need the people on their side. They need that image. Protectors of Lebanon. If that goes, they're vulnerable.
Totally. Makes what they're doing now even more interesting. Things are changing fast inside and outside Lebanon, and the world's watching closer than ever.
So where does that leave us? If there's one thing we've learned, it's that Hezbollah's future is a big question mark. But their impact on the region, that's undeniable. They're a major player, for good or for bad.
Absolutely. And as we've seen, understanding them means ditching the simple stories. It's complicated. The contradictions, the internal and external pressures, that's what shapes their every move.
No easy answers, no quick fixes. It's a long game, and you got to be willing to get into the weeds, the messy reality, to even start to grasp it.
Exactly. And never forget the human cost. The individuals, the communities, the impossible choices they face. That's what we're talking about when we talk about this region. The potential for things to get better or much worse, it's always there.
Well said. And on that note, listener, we'll leave you with this. It's easy to label people, groups, as good guys, bad guys. But the world doesn't work that way. To truly understand, you got to embrace the complexity, be willing to learn, and admit when you don't have all the answers.
Because if we want peace, if we want things to get better, it starts with looking past those easy answers and really seeing the world as it is, even the messy parts.
Couldn't have said it better myself. We'll be back next week with another deep dive, something else to make you think. Until then, thanks for listening.